So at this point, so far as I can tell, everything is working here in our password reset form. But as we saw, it's really cumbersome to try to verify all this stuff by hand. So before moving on, let's write an integration test to verify all of these different things that can happen, all of these different branches. Like I said, we'll leave this one as an exercise, but everything else we're going to cover. Let's make an integration test for it. Here we go. Here we go, and I'm just going to close the other tabs here. Let's take a look at the account activations test. Oh, that was in the user signup test, wasn't it? We didn't have a separate test for account activations. They're right here. Yeah. So there will be some similarities. We want this setup method to be the same. I'm going to clear those deliveries. And then we also need an @user. All right, so let's say test, password resets. We're just going to put everything in one big test here with a bunch of assertions. All right, let's just go through the process one step at a time. Start with, let's log out here. Start with this forgot password page. So this is get, this is the new password reset path. It's my convention in tests. Doesn't really matter, but that's what I use. In fact, let's look at the table here. So this is the new password reset path. And we should render the right template here. Oops. Password reset / new. And in fact, let's change to our guard window. Save that. All right. Okay, so we roll into this page here. Oops, let's look at it. So we go to the forgot password page. That's this part that we just tested here. Submit an empty email. That should give us a flash message and re-render the new template. So we're, in this case, going to post. Look here. It's a post to the password resets path. And then the params, you can see here, params of password reset of email. So that's going to be this, password reset, and then email will just be empty. And the flash should not be empty. And it should re-render the template. In fact, it's just this here. And then we might put in a valid email too, so let's do this. That's the next thing. That's if you put in a valid email like this. So this is going to be @user.email. This is for valid email. And the flash should still not be empty, but in this case we should be redirected to the root URL. Something else important happens there. You can see that we're sending that email. So let's look at this here. This is right here. This is the same thing. We want to make sure that an email got delivered, so let's do that. All right, and now we can check to see that the digest actually got updated. We could do this. We're just going through here. This is this line here. Now in this case, we can compare the @user here to the reloaded version of the same user, because this affects the database. Say this. And now we're ready to test the password reset form. Let's just look at that in the log here. It's up here. Where's the email? Here's the email. Nope. Here's the email. Go to this here. Of course, that's a valid token and a valid email address, but we want to check the error cases as well. In fact, we should do this first. So this is the password reset form. And one of the things that we can have wrong here is that this email could be wrong. So this is a GET request. Look at this. It's a GET request to the edit password reset path of token. But now we need the token. So if you think about it, it might be tempting to use @user.token. Let's try that. And then the email is this gives us an error though, because remember that the reset token is a virtual attribute here. Right? It's part of this after accessor, and it gets set only when the digest gets set right here. But this @user has been reloaded from the database, and in fact, it never had a reset token. The reset token is attached to this user here. But remember, we can pull that user out with assigns, so let's do that. Assigns of user, the symbol user, and then change these just to the local variable user. There we go. So now the route actually resolves, and we can get to testing the result of doing this GET request. So if the email is wrong, it should be redirected. That's down here. That means that this will not find the user. So let's do that. In fact, we can just copy this here. Oh, and I expected that to pass, but that's because I was being stupid here. This is a valid email address. I want this. Let's just put a blank in there. Good. Something else that can go wrong is this activated could be false. In fact, we saw that I actually made a mistake with that, so it's really good to have a test for that. In order to have this happen, we actually have to change the status of this user. So we can do this user.togglebang and change the user to inactive, and then get this with a valid email. This is what happens. We hit it with a valid token and email. Actually, the token doesn't matter. But now the user is inactive, so this should be redirected here. And now let's toggle it back. Something else that can go wrong is we could have the right email but the wrong token. So let's do that here. It should also be redirected to the root URL. And finally, we get to write email, write token. That's this here. And let's assert that the write edit template is rendered. right, that's this right here. So we finally got into this. And there's one thing I want to check. Now remember, we did something tricky here. We put in this hidden field that has the email address right here. That's the kind of thing that if it ever goes wrong, it would just be a mysterious failure. It'd be very confusing. So let's put in an assertion that that's there on the page. This is one of those rare cases where I think it's a good idea to test HTML structure, but we won't be testing anything that could likely break, so this is a pretty robust test. What we want to do is assert the presence of an input tag, so that's assert select. So input, and we want it to have the right name. Well, actually, let's take a look at it. Let's check the name, the type, to make sure it's hidden, and the value. So that's this. Name equals email. Type equals hidden. So we've done things kind of like this before, but now you can see that you can put a bunch of these different attributes in here. The value equals question mark. We'll escape it out like this, user.email. So that should work. All right. Once we get to that form, we want to submit it, and so we could have an invalid password and confirmation. We could do like this. So let's check to see what happens in that case. You can see from the table this involves a patch request to the password reset path. So let's do that. And let's put in the email address, which will be correct. This is the hidden field. But then the password and confirmation will be wrong. There's no way for users to edit this, so it should always just be user.email. But the password does get filled out. So they mismatch. And what should this do? Well, we want to have it render the errors, so we can check that like this. We can look for a div with ID error explanation, so let's do that. So assert select. So let's see if that works. Okay. And now let's check the case of blank password and confirmation. This is a tricky little case right here. It's like this. And this is the same thing as this, except just with blanks. Of course, we didn't actually have a test there. Let's put something in here. This should set the flash. And render the edit page. All right, now we're ready for the last thing, which is what happens if you put in a valid password and confirmation. Just copy this, almost the same. Valid password and confirmation, let's just make sure it's the same. And what should happen, let's take a look at this here. On successful update, it should redirect to the user after setting the flash, so let's do that. Oh, and the user should be logged in. So the user should be logged in, the flash should be set, and should be redirected to the profile page. All right, that's a great test. We've just gone through all of the different things that can go wrong, with one exception, the exception being the password reset expired, which is, as I said before, left as an exercise. But we saw how cumbersome this was to do by hand, and now we've got this great test that's going to catch anything that goes wrong. Let's rerun the whole test suite to make sure we're green. All right. One of the great things about having such a good test for this functionality is that we can refactor, and in fact there are a couple of things I'd like to change. So let's take a look at this. I realized actually that this stuff in here logically belongs in its own filter. So I'm going to factor this out. I'm going to call this valid user. Oh, and the convention I adopt, this is actually the Rails convention, confirms a valid user. And I can just paste that in. And then we can put that up here, the before action valid user. So we can save that and make sure we're still green. And I've also realized that this here, this if password reset expired, should actually apply to the edit action as well, which suggests putting it in another filter. So we should get rid of this here and put this in here. Actually, it has to go after valid user, doesn't it? So if we look at valid user, if @user is nil, this will be invalid. This will just redirect to the root URL. So this actually has to go after that, so that we're guaranteed to have a valid @user. But then we can put something here. We can say check expiration. And that's also only edit and update. In fact, let's just copy it. And we can paste this in. Oops. Okay, that's good. We don't actually have tests for that, but that's an exercise, as I mentioned. But at least there aren't any syntax errors or anything like that. So for example, if we'd forgotten to do this here, if I've left this as else if, that would have been easily caught by our test. There we go. And this is the sort of thing that I might factor into a method. Let's do that. For some reason, I don't like having the parentheses here. Save that. Oh, we've got an error, so why is that? Oh, I forgot the question mark. It's because of the auto completion. I used the tab completion, but it didn't complete the question mark, so that should be green now. Good. So that's the sort of refactoring that I really like to do, but I would just be terrified I would break something if not for this test suite. All right, this is a quick insert. there was a text box back there indicating that there's actually something wrong. Let me show you what that is. So suppose we go here and get a password reset. Submit that, and let's get it here. It's right here. So I did a quick test before where I did something here. I did the password and then left the confirmation blank, and that actually works fine. The problem is, what happens if you do this? Just the confirmation. Ah, that's not good. It says password has been reset, but this is a lie. In fact, nothing happened. So what happened there is that in the user model, because of this here, because of, where is it? It's the, under password, allow blank true right there. Because of that, when the password is blank, it actually doesn't run the validations at all. So I believed that what would happen is that the password confirmation validation would fire here, but it did not, as you can see. So what we need to do is change this here. Instead of saying both passwords blank, we should just say password blank, and it should just be this right here. But in order to get that working, I'm going to write a test first. So let's do this. Let's say blank password here, and then just make the password blank and put this as something valid. So this should fail. Right, and then let's change this to password blank. Turns true if password is blank. Let's get rid of this here. And we can change this here. Save that and see how we are. Oh, still red. Oh, no method password blank. That's true, I didn't change it, so here we go. Test, man, they catch everything. Okay, so that's green. Now, oops, let's rerun the test suite, and we can also check it here. So if the confirmation is blank, or if the confirmation is not blank, this should give us a flash message. And if this is not blank, but the confirmation is blank, it should give us this. There we go. Excellent. Yep, and one more thing, since now the confirmation being blank is caught by the validation, we can just do this. Password can't be blank. All right.